Hi, everyone. Thank you for returning. Hope you had a good break. So our next speaker is Stephen Hong from the County of Santa Clara. Stephen Hong is a senior GIS analyst and 911 public safety lead for the Technology Services and Solutions Department here at the County of Santa Clara. He's tasked with integrating GIS into a 911 system that predated GIS. Steve developed key products, including the custom map viewer and the city source data set. This has also evolved beyond public safety applications and now has become an integral part of county operations. Steve was actually well into a semiconductor career when he discovered he could actually make a living from his favorite pastime of geography through GIS. An employee of the county since 2011 and a winner of the forward-looking TSS Digitopia 2035 internal contest, Steve is a firm believer that the visual nature of GIS will help simplify an ever-increasingly complex world. Steve, I'll hand it off to you, sir.
Thank you, Louie. So today's GIS day, but I want to talk about data. Why? Well, GIS technology, or any technology for that matter, starts out with the strength of your data. However, unfortunately, I don't think data always gets the love that it deserves. Let me elaborate. This flexing jack-o'-lantern is your reaction after viewing a vendor's demo. You're really pumped up and you ask the vendor, will it work with my data? The vendor kind of ponders and says, yes, it can, because anything's possible. So you're ready to go. However, this is your reaction after you actually plug in your own data. You feel like you've been tricked with no treat. When you finally realize the effort that it takes to get your data in there and to maintain it, oh, man, it's like a pain in the neck. Hence, it leads to the graveyard of apps. Updating data. It's a story of twos. There's too many data sources with unique schemas, too many apps requiring unique schemas. For those of you who may not know the term, schema, you can think of us from a database perspective, like a giant Excel spreadsheet. You got your rows, your columns. The columns may have, in terms of addresses, maybe a house number, a street name, a street type. Those type of things make up your schema, and it has to be very precise under the hood of an application in order for it to work. So you ask any staff out there, outside of the vendor, what's the hardest thing? The hardest thing is trying to maintain the data after an app goes live. Because what's going to happen? Once you find out that your data is so hard to maintain, you're kind of unwilling to keep updating it. It just becomes a chore. Soon your data gets out of date. Maybe you can get away with it in the beginning, but as time goes on, your users are going to realize that it's out of date. And eventually they're not going to trust your data and they just stop using it. Your app just dies. I've seen so many apps, so many systems have died within the first year because it's so hard to keep it updated. So back in 2017, I tried to address the first problem where there's too many data sources coming in. So back then I started RAMPS, which stands for Regional Address Map for Public Safety. This picture was the actual picture I used to pitch the idea. That picture of a RAM was the regional address map, and that represented the cities. RAMPS, the PS stands for public safety. I would append additional public safety layers to it, which will lead to that top plateau, the CAD, or computer-aided dispatch system. And I would say since then we've been largely successful. Today we have over 750,000 address points and participation by every single city in the county. This is the basic idea. I had city data. I would modify it into the county schema. And Granted, it was a little bit arbitrary. It just so happened it was the schema they were using at that time for the biggest customer we had, which was the assessor. Now, the downside of that is the assessor needs wasn't exactly what public safety needed. So I had to create additional fields. And in so doing that process, we realized there's some fields in the county schema that are kind of forgotten. Maybe the vendor had stuck it in the beginning, or other people had appended additional fields but had since retired. But we were afraid to get rid of it because we didn't know how important it was or someone's still using it. But so I modified it, as you can see in step 4, and it worked. Everything worked well as it went to a single app. Another way to look at it is through this diagram. You can see I have a lot of cities here on the left for sources, and they're being all aggregated. So I like to think of it as myself as being a location aggregator. You put that together into the ranch process, you modify things, and it comes out to that 911 app. One of the reasons why all the cities bought into it, there's no disruptions to the ongoing internal city operations. They just took it, and I said, hey, I will do the heavy lifting. I will modify it. I will put in the ramps. Don't worry about it. It's going to go to 911. And in 911, the single app was more jam. So there's a tabular side to it, but the application, the tabular application predated GIS. So I got the opportunity to create my own map viewer. There's no offense to some of these pre-made apps that are out there. However, it didn't fit my use cases. For my use case, I had to make it very fast and very reliable. If you use a vendor's app, sometimes you don't know what's going on underneath the hood. So it's hard to make some real wholesale changes to optimize things. The reason my app had to be fast and reliable was just for 911. So seconds do matter. If you're having a heart attack or something, you don't want a dispatcher waiting for something to be spinning. When reliability is the same thing, right? Because this is for, people's lives are at stake. And in this lower screen here on the left, you can see that's the Google Analytics. Because I wrote my own app, I can put in the Google Analytics and start tracking it. This is only for 1 month, but if you go back several years, you'll see the same thing. It receives over 200 hits per day, and it has to run 24/7, 365 days. So I don't know all the other apps in the counties, but it's got to be one of the most heavily trafficked site on a day-to-day basis here at the county. Oh, and that little guy in the middle, that is my mascot. So he's a piece of toast with some grape jam on his face. That's why it's more jam. The funny thing about us having a successful app is word gets around and people want to do their own app. So what happens though, these other customers have a bigger budget and they want to make an app that has a lot more bells and whistles. Hey, their budget has to be bigger. My budget was 0. And so what they want to do was just grab my address points and stick it into their application. Well, they thought it would be plug and play. It wasn't the case. These customized apps had to have customized data. And these customers will look at me and say, and Steve, we don't have a GIS person. So I'll just stare back at them, right? Because I'm just one person. I can't babysit and try to do a customized data stream for your customized app for everybody. If I do that, I'll just run out of time. But as more and more customers start making this request, I figure, okay, I have to change something on my end. And so with this, the thing I changed the most was throwing out the county schema and putting another schema that had more comprehensive fields. So in the case, it was very fortunate, actually. The federal government, there was a federal mandate that came out. They wanted the 911 organizations to switch to next generation 911. The thinking at the time, and it still is that cities, counties, state, and the federal government for public safety will be all using a common schema. This way, everyone could jump in if the emergency escalated. They could jump in and take a look at fields and know what each of the fields meant. When I looked at this schema, I said, this is pretty comprehensive. I probably can use this not only for public safety for one app, but I can do it for many apps. Another benefit of having a standardized schema that's out there is there's documentation out there. So I mentioned before with the county schema, because it was homegrown, there were some fields on there that we had no idea what it was used for anymore. But now if someone asked me what the field stood for or what the purpose of it, I can say, just look on the internet because it's out there. One other main characteristic of NG911 is that there's no abbreviations. Where in the past, maybe you'll say 100 North Main Street, maybe North is abbreviated to N and street could be abbreviated to ST. There's none of that in NG911. Everything is spelled out. So North will be NORTH, street is STREET. And so from the diagram below, you can see it's still basically the same. You have the city data. I'm modifying it quite a bit to this new data schema called NINA Next Gen 911. And then I would modify it to push it out to the app. But again, here I'm doing it to multiple apps, not just that MoreGem app, but I'm doing to 5 different apps. So in 2022, you can tell how things have changed. Where before I was just looking at that teal section, the sources, and that was the location aggregator. But now I view myself as the location controller because now I'm not only just aggregating the data, but I'm pushing out customized data streams to these individual apps. Just like before with my ramps of 2017, I didn't want the customers, the end customers of the app to suffer too much in terms of having to modify themselves. So I'm doing it for them with no disruptions to their applications. So that's the big difference. I have a lot of modifications up front with the source side and a lot of modifications at the very end for the apps. What I'm most proud about, if you notice on the purple side, I have 5 apps here. The first 4 is still about public safety. The 5th one is probably what I'm most excited about because it's non-public safety. The county has adopted the address points as the official address points for Santa Clara County. So that just opens the door to a whole bunch of other opportunities. For example, if the county really wants to create a true digital twin, this will be a foundational piece. Okay, now I'm going to do a live demo. Why do I don't want to risk doing a live demo? Because I want to prove to you that there's nothing up my sleeves. That if I have this common data set and a standardized schema, I can actually manipulate it into customized data streams to 3 different apps. Now, this is a very super simple demo, but I think it will serve its purpose. So I have scenario 1. I start with an address, 150 West Tasman Drive. As you recall, what I just mentioned about the NINA NG911 standard, everything is spelled out. On the right, I have app 1. App 1 is going to require, things abbreviated. Back in the old days, the USPS, the Postal Service, where West is now W and Drive is now DR. App 2, that's good. They want the whole street spelled out, but now they want the city jurisdiction included. In this case, will be San Jose. And finally, app 3. They just want the whole shebang. They want the abbreviated streets and also the city abbreviated. Scenario 2 below, which is the whole point. Well, a lot of times people are scared about updating data. What happens next quarter when you get a whole bunch of new address points? Can I integrate that in to the apps without much difficulty? We shall see. So first, let me get out of my slideshow. You can see here in that big red dot is 150 West Tasman Drive, which is incidentally the TSS headquarters, the county's IT's main building. And you can see the word West Tasman Drive all spelled out. What I'm going to do next is go to my ETL tool. My ETL tool, it stands for Extract, Transform, and Load. I use FME. For me, it's very convenient because I have a high volume of address points and a high volume, a number of apps I need to push it out to. But of course, you can use your own different method. You can use ArcGIS has their own built-in model builder that's free, and you can go with that. If you're a Python scripter, you can go with that. There's some free open source ETLs like Talon. But another reason for using this FME is it's very visual. You can tell what I have here is 3 different color coding of apps. The blue one here is app 1, which I mentioned has abbreviated streets. App 2 is in purple with the city jurisdiction, and app 3 with all the different abbreviations. So let me just go ahead and run this. We'll just take a second because at this point, I only have one point in there. Just give it a second to run. And as I mentioned, I like to program my own apps. It just makes it so much easier to control things and manipulate the outputs. Okay, so now it's done. It's saying it's successful. So let's go ahead and open. Let's say this is your map browser. I will open my 3 apps. Okay, app 1, here we go. Remember, this is the one with the US postal abbreviations. All right. See W for West, DR for Drive. Let's go to app 2. This is the one with the city jurisdiction spelled out. Okay, it's showing San Jose. Way to go. Now app 3. This has the streets abbreviated and also the jurisdiction. Woof. Okay, that worked. Now, here we go. The next task. Next quarter, let me add some address points. So that was my 150. I've gone ahead and added 50 address points here. Not only I extended down the street for West Tasman, you can see up here I got some, it says 190, 150, 100 at the tail end of the address. Those are suite numbers. Where all these points are green, these ones down here are beige. The beige ones are from the city of Santa Clara, while the green ones from San Jose. This Guadalupe River is kind of the boundary. So now there's about 50 points here. Let's go ahead and run this back in my ETL tool. Where I had before, this was my 150. I'm going to disable it for a moment. Yes. And I'm going to activate those 50 points now. Okay. And I'll run this. So it takes slightly longer, but it will give me a time to show you what I'm doing. If I'm being honest, I don't always use a whole lot of Esri, but I know there are many Esri users out there. So when I'm plugging into these different apps, I'm pushing it out to an ArcGIS online service. All right, once I get those ArcGIS online services, it will be pulled into my application where I will display it. So you can tell here, those 50 plus the one from 150 Tasman has been implemented here. And it looks to be completed. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my app now. Here's my app one. I'm going to refresh it. Okay, looks like I have a whole bunch of points. It should still be with the postal abbreviations. All right, I got the west and the drive. Here's some with units. Okay, so everything looks like it's going pretty good. West Drive. Here's one that says Champion Court with a CT. That's the way to go. Let's go to app 2. App 2, I'm going to refresh this. All right, it worked again. The ArcGIS Online web service got updated. This is the one with the city jurisdiction spelled out. We get San Jose. Okay, everything's looking fine. Okay, here comes Santa Clara. All right, Santa Clara. I'm good here too. Now I'm cross my fingers. I'm going to renew app 3. This has everything abbreviated. So I have West Tasman Drive, W and DR, and San Jose as SJ. Okay, how about Santa Clara? All right, same thing. I have SC for Santa Clara. So I would say it's a pretty good success. Let me start up my slideshow again. Okay, so scenario 1, passed with flying colors. 150 Tasman Drive, West Tasman Drive, all 3 apps showed. And also scenario 2, when I updated points, everything went smoothly. So what's my key takeaways here? One is that data updates can be scary, but can be done with a little planning. Hey, this is my son's jack-o'-lantern. I showed the jack-o'-lantern I carved and what my wife carved, so I'll be remiss if I didn't show the jack-o'-lantern my son carved, okay? So a little bit of stretch, but it's okay. A tip that will help you when you try to do these is having a comprehensive data schema. In my case, I use the next generation 911 data schema. Don't be afraid of having extra fields. Extra fields are not necessarily bad. You keep them as optional, but like in my case, I found out that, hey, there's additional apps, additional customers that wanted some fields. So I was pretty lucky that, in my case, a 911 dispatcher doesn't need a zip code, but like a sheriff or someone else, they want the zip code. They want the whole postal address because they want to mail a customer or user later on. A big thing was changing my mentality from just being a location aggregator to a location controller. Because you can't expect that the customer at the end will know what to do with your GIS data. This will help you by using that standardized data schema to keep your sanity basically and push out customized data to these customized apps. And the 4th bullet point, as you remember, when I started my slideshow, I showed a bicep and I show a flexi pumpkin. But the real strength, the real flex, comes with flexibility. So if I were to use an analogy, it has a lot less to do with pumping iron and probably a little more to do with something flexible, say, yoga. So with that, I say thank you and stay flexible. And of course, namaste. Thank you very much. Louie, do we have any questions? I have some time.
You know what? We would usually push them, but I think we have just one, and you do have some time, and I'm
Yeah,
not sure if you can see me, but
yeah.
it looks like we got it from Jennifer Zenny.
Okay.
She says, now that you have buy-in from these 17 cities for 911 usage, can we leverage this data collection process to gain more data from the 17?
That is the goal, right? So each city, we have to make some agreement. The original agreement was for 911, and everyone bought into that, and that's what I'm using. The next step was to say, hey, we're going to use this for county operations. Everyone was okay with that as well. The final step is to have that data distributed to everybody. While it's not really, I wouldn't say it's all proprietary information. It's, addresses, you can put it out there. However, because we have these agreements for each of the cities, they have the right to say, okay, we'll distribute the data. And so until all the cities agree to that, I'm not giving out all the addresses one data set, but that's something we're working on to get a memo of understanding to make sure that, yeah, I can distribute that
Okay, sounds
data.
good, Stephen. And we actually have one more question, and since we have 4 minutes, I figured we'll jump on it.
Sure.
This is from Jonathan Hall. He's
Okay.
asking, can public safety personnel add notes to the records for individual addresses? For example, medical needs of residents.
You could. Um, Basically, the way this app works is it uses a lot of GeoJSON, so you can add that note to it. However, right now, for those 911 dispatchers, we're going through the CAD program. So the CAD program has their own fields for putting in those special notes. And that's usually what's being passed down to the public safety personnel, your EMS, your sheriff, your fire people.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Sounds like we're good to go. And
All right.
thank you so much, Stephen. That was a great presentation. We really appreciate it. We'll take another 10-minute break, everyone, and see everybody back at 11:30. Thank you, Steve.